The reason Aiden and I embarked on this journey to do a retrospective on every Ultimate Alliance series game is because that was one of the PS2 games we played the most growing up, because it was a really solid RPG beat-em-up series, and because we liked Marvel superheroes. We'll come back to Ultimate Alliance yet, but we decided the story of Justice League Heroes was far too interesting to pass up on talking about, as something of a footnote and side note in the Ultimate Alliance video series, being something of a response to those games in a lot of ways, playing fairly similarly and coming out a mere week before Ultimate Alliance came out, being one of the better licensed games of the era. Justice League Heroes didn't go on to have such acclaim. Justice League Heroes was made by Snowblind Studios, a studio that was around from the late 90s through 2012 when the studio would close down. Over its 15 years in the industry, they primarily worked on the game series Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, which was a top-down beat-em-up with RPG elements that would go on to at least partially inspire the eventual game series Ultimate Alliance, which would start with the X-Men Legends series back in 2004. Snowblind wanted to get in on that action since they invented the genre in this style, and Ravensoft was licensing Marvel characters to make a solid, profitable licensed game. So Snowblind teamed up with Warner Brothers to create Justice League Heroes, using DC characters. Snowblind would keep working for another 6 years, only making one more game, a licensed Lord of the Rings game with Warner Brothers in 2011, before being folded into Monolith Productions, who made most recently a couple of Lord of the Rings games in the Arkham style, and are currently working on a Wonder Woman game that has been announced, though nothing has been released yet in terms of first looks at that project. So I guess it all kind of came full circle, and now they're a support studio working on Lord of the Rings and DC games. Much like the aforementioned Ultimate Alliance series of games, the story is pretty light, but just kind of an excuse to have the team of heroes meet up and fight a threat. In this game, Brainiac, a Superman villain, is threatening the world with the help of Darkseid, who kind of ends up being the secret final boss of the game. Throughout the game, more heroes team up with the Justice League, and inevitably defeat Darkseid. Much like Ultimate Alliance, the game has several heroes from throughout the DC universe in this case. Though, this game, like the X-Men Legend games, are based around the Justice League, and perhaps more specifically the roster from Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, a couple of shows that took place in the DC AU and was coming out around this time. Aquaman is playable and was an alright character, being physical with some water-based laser moves. Not exactly how Aquaman works, but that's fine. The version in the game is Arthur Curry. We talked about his origins recently in the Aquaman video, but to recap, Aquaman is the king of Atlantis, and first appeared in More Fun Comics 73, then later a more fleshed out version with a human identity, Arthur Curry, first appeared in Adventure Comics 211. Aquaman has constantly evolved over the years. This version in the game is taking his look from his Peter David run, which is the one that the Justice League cartoon was also taking from. Hal Jordan is the original Green Lantern. There was Alan Scott, who's the original, but he has a separate origin. So ostensibly, he is the first Green Lantern, as they are today, being guardians of a sector in the universe. Hal Jordan is an unlockable character, and is the most expensive of the unlockable heroes. Characters in this game are unlocked through a coin system, or shields. You can also buy some costumes with these shields. He's a Jon Stewart clone and plays identically, but unlike an alternate skin, he can be played alongside Jon in levels where you're allowed to select your hero. Hal, much like Jon, relies on a series of energy attacks, such as a hammer move and a laser shot. The hammer is busted, especially when paired with the Flash, who can move enemies in his tornado move that also does damage. Makes teaming Flash and Green Lantern a pretty strong pairing. Though you probably want to main Jon since he's a story character and not a bonus, so you're going to naturally level him up as you go through the game, where Hal's going to start from scratch as a selectable hero. Hal first appeared in Showcase number 22, and after receiving a Green Lantern power ring from fallen Green Lantern Abin Sur, becomes the first Green Lantern of Earth, which is part of Sector 2814. Through the years, he has also been possessed by a color demon Paradox, and destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, and even had a tenure as the DC hero the Spectre. However, he's most well known as Green Lantern, and I'm not going to bore you with too much lore. Martian Manhunter is a founding member of the original Justice League. He's pretty similar to Superman in this game. He's a flying brawler with a projectile. He's pretty solid, not top tier, but not trash either. First appearing in Detective Comics 225, Martian Manhunter has constantly been there for a lot of DC's major events, but is always an overlooked tagger on. I like Martian Manhunter, but if someone says this guy is one of your favorite superheroes from the DC universe, they're probably lying to you. Batman is next, and come on, we all know Batman. Created in Detective Comics 27, Batman has had numerous iterations, being one of the most iconic figures in American media, not just American comics or film. Batman, for his part, is okay. Lower end of okay, probably, actually. He can't fly, and he has projectiles, but, especially in his opening mission with Superman, he'll die a bunch. But regardless, he has a black cowl, which he has in a lot of the comics more recently. But more recently, when this game was made, though, in 2006, he was running the blue cowl, though that is an unlockable suit if you get the 1970s costume. John Stewart is the main Green Lantern in this game. This choice is likely because of the Justice League Unlimited show, because he's probably the Earth Green Lantern who has the least history with the Justice League in the comics, with the main leaguer being Hal, Guy being the main character of Justice League International, and Kyle on the JLA for a fair amount of time when the other Lanterns were off Earth, and while Hal was being Spectre and Parallax. However, John was the Green Lantern on Justice League Unlimited, which this game draws from heavily, so that's why he was picked most likely. His powers are the same, ones I described for Hal, but as I said, he's pretty solid. We mained him as much as possible. John Stewart was the second Green Lantern of Earth, and despite appearing originally after Guy Gardner, was the first to get a power ring full-time as the stand-in Green Lantern, and eventually as a full-fledged Lantern of his own. Supergirl, or Kara Zor-El, is next, and is basically just Superman again. We didn't really use her much, but from what I gathered, she's pretty much just Superman. Supergirl first appeared in Action Comics 252, after being demoed in Superman 123 the year before as a figment of Jimmy Olsen's imagination, and Supergirl kind of has a convoluted history like a lot of the long-running DC characters. Dina Lance is another character I talked about recently when she came up in my Birds of Prey video, but to recap, her mother is also named Dina Lance, was the Golden Age Black Canary. In the Silver Age, she moved to the main universe, but to keep her hot and not old, they said this was actually the original's daughter rather than the original herself. Dina premiered in Justice League of America 75 proper, and in this game, she wasn't horrible, but it's definitely not the best, physical with her Screech attack. Kyle Rayner, much like the aforementioned two Green Lanterns, plays exactly the same as the others, but unlike alt costumes, is able to be played concurrently with the standard team, meaning you can technically play Kyle and John on the same team if you felt it necessary. He first appeared in Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48, and was the main Green Lantern of Earth after the destruction of the Green Lantern Corps by the hands of Hal Jordan when possessed by Parallax. Later, when the Corps was revived, and Hal was restored to his former Green Lantern glory, Kyle became Ion, a Blue Lantern. He's filled in a lot of roles since stepping down as the main Green Lantern again. Superman is easily one of the most disappointing characters in the game. The overpowered champion of man first appeared in Action Comics number 1 from 1938, and in this game, you start him in the first mission, and regular guys are able to beat him down in just a few hits. It's kind of lame to play as Superman and have the archetypal power fantasy character reduced to a shit F-tier character, but that's how it is. The only slightly salvageable move in this game is his laser vision, but with other energy-heavy characters being more viable like the 3 Green Lanterns or Zatanna, he's definitely one to leave on the bench, unfortunately, when you're not required to play as him. The Flash, or Wally West, originated as Kid Flash in the comics, the sidekick of Barry Allen, the Flash, before Barry died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and was replaced with Wally, which was one of the few times in DC that a sidekick would replace his original mentor for more than just a couple years. First appearing in Flash 110, Wally would be the main Flash in the Justice League Unlimited, as that show happened when Barry was still dead, so the game went with him rather than Barry. Flash is pretty solid on his own, but when teamed up with one of the Green Lanterns, you definitely have the best duo in this game. Flash can guide enemies while hurting them with his tornado, and if he lines them up with Green Lantern's hammer move, which takes a second to put off, you could wipe out most, if not all, screen enemies in just a couple moves. Flash's Achilles heel is he's occasionally a bit underpowered for bosses since the tornado doesn't really pick them up, but he's a solid character and integral to our best strategy we found in this game. Hawk Girl, or Kendra Sanders, his comic history is massively convoluted, perhaps second in comics lore only to Hawkman. Since DC, as a publishing company, allows people to do whatever they want with the pair and no one ever knows what to do with the pair, they have very convoluted histories at this point, and it all stretches back to their first appearance in 1940's Flash #1. After unlocking Hawk Girl through purchase, we tried to play her and she was fucking horrible. Possibly the worst character in the game, honestly, but we never really had a chance to level her up, and we were kind of stuck with her during the admittedly kind of hard Doomsday boss fight. Wonder Woman first appeared in All-Star Comics #8 from 1942, and is a character we covered a few times in the past, so I won't talk much about her this time in her origins. Wonder Woman is okay, her crown throw is surprisingly effective, and in her couple of duos with Superman, she was definitely leading the charge over Superman, who, as we talked about, is pretty underpowered and shitty. Oliver Queen, or the Green Arrow, is a major Justice League member who originated in More Fun Comics #73. Though he has had many retcons and moves around the DC universe, he ostensibly has always been a modern Robin Hood and the neoliberal hippie counterpart to Batman. In this game we did unlock Green Arrow, but never tried him. The reason being, by the end of this game, we unlocked him, and we just didn't feel the urge to do any more with the game at that time. We'll come back to why. Huntress, or Helena Bertinelli, is here, and she first appeared in Huntress #1, but before that there was a prototype version that was the daughter of the Golden Age Batman and Golden Age Catwoman of Earth 2. Naturally, that explanation didn't really make sense in a post-crisis DC universe, so the Huntress became Helena Bertinelli instead of Helena Wayne, and had her origin overhauled. She was okay in this game, mostly acting as a bow shooter with some fighting mechanics. Meh. Zatanna Zatara is the daughter of the similarly superpowered magician Zatara, who first appeared in Action Comics #1 alongside Superman, interestingly, though in a side story behind the more famous hero. Zatanna was introduced in Hawkman #4 and would quickly become an important aspect of Justice League lore. Zatanna is the best solo character in the game. She has a projectile attack with tracking that overrides the typically awkward aim some of the game's projectiles have without enemy tracking, which, since this power has enemy tracking, makes this significantly overpowered compared to those. And if you power up these moves, along with her health and energy projection, she's incredibly overpowered compared to anyone else in this game. The gameplay for Justice League Heroes, as I implied, is similar to Marvel Ultimate Alliance, with similar enemy types and boss mechanics and levels. How it differs is you always have a party of 2 heroes rather than 4, and most of the game, aside from a handful of levels, you are assigned the characters, which tends to make or break the level. Everyone starts painfully weak, but upgrades come pretty easily, so you'll pretty quickly become playable, but especially early game, you'll need to be cautious. One quirk of this game is you revive fallen heroes at any time by hitting checkpoints, rather than having to wait like you do in Ultimate Alliance, or pay like you do in the X-Men Legends series. This makes it pretty easy to backtrack to the fairly generous checkpoints and revive fallen heroes in a matter of seconds. In this game, all characters have regeneration, so that's worth an upgrade along with health and stronger special moves. Special moves work a lot like special moves in Ultimate Alliance. In terms of special attacks, you have projectile or melee attacks, with the occasional special attack like Green Lantern's able to create a box which corrals enemies into. One thing that's worth noting is that you also have a shield move that is fairly busted, but energy and health won't regain, making it fairly useless in game. The min-max strategy we used during X-Men Legends was way less successful here, since you really couldn't pick your character often, and also because you only ever had 2 heroes, meaning you really just wanted to boost health and recovery, and from there you could boost your main moves the most. Moves can also be boosted with these gems you find strewn about the levels, and they'll boost your energies a bit further beyond just the standard upgrade. You can make your guys a little busted, and it ramps up pretty quickly how good your characters are, to where at the end of the game, you actually have some pretty strong heroes. Bosses are usually pretty underpowered and easy if you're actively killing all the enemies and powering up, especially late game. Unlike X-Men Legends and Ultimate Alliance, the villains aren't super varied beyond the main villains of the game. Gorilla Grodd, Killer Frost, and Prometheus being the most notable guest villains. Brainiac and his various nameless henchmen, as well as Darkseid, are the main villains, but they're a good choice to menace the team. One character I neglected to mention was Doomsday, who is worlds harder than the actual main villains. You're forced to blind pick 6 heroes for a mission, and over the course of said mission you'll switch throughout the teams. Of course, we made 2 strong teams, one with Green Lantern and Flash, and one with Zatanna, and then we made an experimental team, which was Hawkgirl and Aquaman. The experimental team, of course, was the one that went up against Doomsday.
Just go back and I'm dead.
Even though the standard enemies are mostly generic, they do work pretty well for the game, being just kind of a standard beat 'em up like the Ultimate Alliance series. But there are also these bomb dudes that get very annoying, especially considering they're just put out to fuck with you while you attempt these QuickTime events that are strewn throughout the game. This is around the time QuickTime events started becoming very popular in gaming, and QuickTime events are a problem with both this game and Ultimate Alliance, as we'll come to talk about soon. The multiplayer, much like Ultimate Alliance, relies on couch co-op, with each player picking a character. Like I said, you can still get screwed with crappy characters, but duos like Flash and Green Lantern lead to some fun meta gameplay, where one person has the Flash line up the shot for Green Lantern, and it really encourages co-op gameplay, and was admittedly pretty fun to play with Aiden throughout our 6 odd hours playing this game. The in-game graphics are really nice. They look clear, and each character has a clear silhouette and color palette. No issues knowing where you are in the map and in relation to your teammate. Much like the Ultimate Alliance series, the game tried to have some realistic cutscenes, though it isn't nearly as nice as the stuff created for the latter series, since it was seemingly an in-house job, and Batman admittedly has a cheesy look, along with other characters looking a bit janky. But it's fairly nice, no issues here really. The music is pretty generic, but works well enough. I have to admit, Justice League Unlimited had some great tracks. I would have liked if perhaps they'd licensed some of those songs to play during the game, but they didn't. It's all pretty standard video game music, nothing too special. You can collect some suits if you collect the shield collectibles, but admittedly I only really went for unlocking characters, and since I didn't see a huge point in grinding past the original gameplay, since none of them were like bonus levels or anything, I didn't get many of these. But it's cool that people like Superman can get his Earth 2 costume, who Earth 2 Superman, the original Superman, was a pretty important aspect of DC continuity at the time, or Batman can get his 70s costume. It's cool if you get really into it, but as I said, the game didn't grab me enough to grind out these extra suits, since really you just replay levels collecting shields, and it didn't really seem worthwhile to me. It is kind of an issue with this game. You can grind for coins and cosmetics and characters, but there's no bonus missions to play them with, so it doesn't really encourage exploration, especially with the straightforward map structure. Feels more like a game you just run through real quick, and once it's done, it's done. Admittedly, if I had this as a kid, it may be fun to go back for it, but these days I have a lot of game options, and I do love suits, but it seemed more like a box punching grind for coins than a fun expansion to gameplay, so I passed on the extra play for this game despite some cool cosmetics and bonus characters that can be unlocked. The game was pretty well made. We didn't really see any notable glitches or bugs besides occasional camera jank. Nothing really hindered our gameplay though. Mind you, as well, at this time, camera jank was fairly common, so minor cases of it didn't bother me too much, and for the most part the game is actually pretty tight and playable. Overall, Justice League Heroes is fun. Is it great? No, not really. Does it have replayability? No. And the start of the game, you are ungodly weak, which is sort of annoying. But it is easy to revive your characters and just go back to previous checkpoints to revive, so we didn't actually game over very often. There are lots of issues, but it's okay and kind of fun. I think in a world where Ultimate Alliance and X-Men Legends didn't exist, I would really enjoy it. But as you can tell by the tone of this retrospective and the fact that I have frequently used that series as a point of comparison, the elephant in the room is that Ravensoft made a very similar game series and just happened to do it much better than the attempt by Snowblind Studios. This game hasn't really had a lasting impact on the gaming scene or superhero gaming, if we want to pull out that niche. And it never had a sequel, with this being WB and Snowblind's only attempt to bring DC heroes into the genre Marvel was dominating and will continue to play with in the upcoming Ultimate Alliance game series. This game came out alongside a DS and PSP port, along with a Game Boy Advance side game, Justice League Heroes The Flash, which is a Flash starring beat-em-up. But despite the push, it clearly wasn't enough to make a lasting legacy for Justice League Heroes. And just 1 week later, we'd see the release of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which we will talk about very soon.